The fluorescent lights of Nexus Station's maintenance tunnels flickered as Kira Patel methodically worked through her repair checklist. Her calloused hands moved with practiced precision across the environmental control panel, each movement efficient and purposeful. In these narrow passages, far from the station's gleaming public areas, she could almost forget the growing tensions above. The station's vast atrium hosted a different scene entirely. Archerons, with their towering frames and iridescent scales, dominated the space. Their recent military victories had only heightened their natural sense of superiority. Humans, now a minority on what was once their own station, learned to walk close to the walls, eyes down, voices hushed. Kira preferred it down here, where the soft hum of machinery drowned out the politics and prejudice. At least, that's what she told herself. The truth was more complex, buried beneath years of carefully constructed normalcy. Her hands might have been rough from tool work, but the calluses had different origins, thousands of hours of combat training on Earth, before everything changed. A commotion echoed through the ventilation shaft above, shouting, the sound of something heavy hitting the floor. Kira's hands stilled. Through the grating, she glimpsed an Archeron enforcement squad surrounding a human vendor, his fruit scattered across the pristine floor. License expired, the lead enforcer growled, mandibles clicking in satisfaction. Unauthorized commerce is a serious offense. The vendor, an elderly man Kira knew as Mr. Watanabe, trembled. Please, I submitted the renewal request 3 cycles ago. The processing time has doubled for human applications, the enforcer cut in. Security concerns. His squad mates laughed, a harsh sound that set Kira's teeth on edge. Her grip tightened on the wrench in her hand. 5 years of maintaining her cover, of being invisible, weighed against the scene unfolding above. The wrench would make an effective weapon, she knew exactly where to strike an Archeron to temporarily paralyze their left side. The knowledge sat in her mind, unused but never forgotten. But she stayed still, watching as they confiscated Mr. Watanabe's inventory and issued a fine that would take months to pay. The moment passed. She returned to her work, movement slightly more forceful than necessary. Later that night, in her small quarters, Kira sat cross-legged on her bed, staring at a simple metal disc barely larger than her palm. The station's artificial night cycle cast shadows across its scratched surface. She rarely took it out, too risky, but tonight felt different. The disc was her only reminder of who she used to be, Lieutenant Kira Patel, Earth Special Forces, Infiltration Division. The division had been disbanded after the Archeron Empire's expansion forced Earth into its current, protected status, a polite term for subjugation. Most of her colleagues had been reassigned or disappeared. Kira had chosen a different path, using her training to fade into the background of society, watching and waiting. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts, her datapad displaying tomorrow's maintenance schedule. The list was longer than usual, the station's aging systems required increasingly frequent repairs. But buried in the routine tasks was a notation that made her pause: primary security grid maintenance, authorized personnel only. She had never been assigned to the security systems before. The Archerons kept tight control over anything security-related, especially where humans were concerned. Either someone had made a mistake, or, she pushed the thought aside. Paranoia was dangerous in her position. The next morning brought new tensions to the station. A group of Archeron youth, emboldened by their species' dominance, had taken to patrolling the human residential sections. They claimed to be providing security. In reality, they were little more than bullies with unofficial backing from the authorities. Kira passed them on her way to the security grid, tool belt clinking softly against her leg. She kept her pace steady, her posture unremarkable. The group's leader, a particularly tall Archeron with deep purple scales, watched her with obvious disdain. Another human maintenance drone, he commented to his companions. They're only good for fixing what their betters build. The words were meant to provoke, to remind humans of their place. Kira let them wash over her, her expression neutral. Inside, she noted the group's positions, their weapons, their patterns of movement. Old habits died hard. The security grid's access panel was located in a quiet corridor near the station's core. As she worked, Kira's trained eye caught subtle details, recent modifications to the system, changes that weren't in any official documentation. The Archerans were upgrading their control capabilities, preparing for something. A shadow fell across her work area. Human. The voice was cold, authoritative. This area is restricted. Kira turned slowly, holding up her work order. Maintenance schedule, sir. Authorized by control. The Archeran security officer, Commander Daxthor, she recognized him from station bulletins, snatched the datapad from her hand. His eyes narrowed as he reviewed the authorization. A mistake, he declared. Security systems are not for your kind to touch. His tone carried years of ingrained superiority. Return to your regular duties. And be grateful I don't report this attempted breach. Kira nodded, gathering her tools with deliberate care. But as she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of the commander's screen, troop movements, deployment schedules. The Archerans were mobilizing, not just here but across multiple stations. Something was coming. The realization settled in her stomach like cold lead. The question was, could she maintain her cover when everything started to unravel? The weight of her past training and her present responsibility pressed down on her as she walked away, feeling Daxthor's suspicious gaze following her retreat. In the safety of the maintenance tunnels, Kira allowed herself a moment of clarity. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. The Archerans were tightening their grip, and sooner or later, someone would have to take a stand. She just hadn't expected that moment to come so soon, or that she might be the one forced to make that choice. The following week brought changes to Nexus Station that even the most oblivious residents couldn't ignore. Additional Archeran security forces arrived daily, their gleaming armor a sharp contrast to the station's utilitarian corridors. They moved in groups, conducting routine inspections that seemed focused exclusively on human-operated businesses and residences. Kira watched it all through the eyes of her carefully maintained persona, just another maintenance worker, beneath notice. But her trained instincts screamed warnings at every new development. The Archerans were systematically tightening their control, and the human population was beginning to crack under the pressure. During her rounds, she overheard fragments of conversations in the human quarters. Families discussing whether to abandon their businesses and leave the station. Young workers weighing the risks of organized protest. The air was thick with fear and suppressed anger. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine evening in the station's marketplace. Kira was repairing a faulty ventilation panel when she heard the commotion. Through the grating, she saw Raj, a teenage human boy who helped run his family's spice stall, surrounded by Archeran youth patrollers. "We've received reports of contaminated goods," their leader announced, overturning containers of expensive spices. "Can't be too careful with human vendors." Raj stood his ground, something rare these days. "Those reports are lies. Our spices are certified by station control." The leader's backhand sent him sprawling. "Questioning Archeran authority is an offense, little human." Kira's muscles tensed. She knew she should stay hidden, maintain her cover. That's what her training dictated: survive, observe, wait for the right moment. But as she watched Raj try to protect his family's livelihood, something inside her shifted. Before she could move, another voice cut through the tension. "Leave him alone." Rita Sharma, the station's medical assistant, pushed through the gathering crowd. She helped Raj to his feet, facing the Archerans with remarkable composure. "These harassment tactics are violations of station commerce laws." Commander Daxthor emerged from the crowd, his scales shimmering with barely contained aggression. "Laws can be adjusted when security requires it. And you, medical assistant, are interfering with a legitimate investigation." Rita stood her ground. "I'm preventing the abuse of a minor." If you want to arrest me for that, Commander, go ahead. But know that some of us won't stay silent forever. The marketplace had gone completely still. Humans and Arcturans alike watched the confrontation, sensing its significance. This wasn't just about spices or one brave medical assistant, it was about the breaking point that had finally arrived. Daxtor's mandibles clicked in what Kira recognized as amusement. Brave words. But words are all your kind has left. He gestured to his guards. Take her into custody. The human needs a lesson in proper respect. As they moved to grab Rita, Kira made her decision. 5 years of careful anonymity dissolved in an instant. She dropped from the ventilation shaft, landing between Rita and the guards with fluid grace that no mere maintenance worker should possess. Step back, she said quietly, her stance relaxed but ready. The nearby humans gasped, they knew her only as the quiet repair worker who kept to herself. But something in her voice made the Arcturan guards hesitate. Daxtor's eyes narrowed. Another human who needs to learn their place. He studied her with new interest. Or perhaps, something more. Your movement suggests training. Military, perhaps. Kira remained silent, but her eyes never left the commander. She could feel the weight of both Rita and Raj behind her, the watching crowd, the years of accumulated tension about to explode. Interesting, Daxtor continued. A hidden warrior among the workers. Did you think we wouldn't eventually find your kind? The remnants of Earth's pathetic resistance. There's no resistance here, Commander, Kira replied evenly. Just people trying to live their lives with dignity. Something your recent actions have made increasingly difficult. The commander's laugh was harsh. Dignity? Your species forfeited that right when you failed to defend your territories. Now you exist by our grace, and that grace is running thin. Around them, more Arcturan guards had arrived, forming a circle. The humans in the crowd began to back away, fear warring with hope on their faces. Kira knew she had crossed a line, her carefully constructed cover was unraveling by the second. Last chance, Daxtor announced. Step aside and accept your punishment, or face the consequences of defying Arcturan authority. Kira's response was measured, her voice carrying clearly through the tense silence. If you want to continue abusing civilians, Commander, you'll have to go through me first. The words hung in the air like a physical thing. Behind her, she heard Rita's sharp intake of breath. The Arcturan youth who had started this looked uncertain, perhaps realizing they had catalyzed something beyond their control. Daxtor's expression shifted from amusement to cold fury. So be it. By station law, I hereby challenge you to formal combat. Victory determines the right of authority. Unless, of course, you wish to withdraw your defiance. The crowd erupted in murmurs. Formal challenges were rare, typically reserved for disputes between Arcturan nobles. For a commander to challenge a human was unprecedented, and likely fatal for the human involved. But Kira felt an almost physical relief. After years of hiding, of watching, of maintaining her cover, the path forward was suddenly clear. She had trained for moments like this, even if she'd hoped they would never come. I accept your challenge, Commander, she replied, her voice steady. Name your terms. The gathered humans gasped. Even Rita, still standing protectively near Raj, made a sound of dismay. But Kira kept her eyes on Daxtor, reading the subtle signs of his reaction. The commander hadn't expected acceptance, he had counted on fear to maintain control, as it had so many times before. Tomorrow, Central Arena, he declared. Traditional combat rules. No energy weapons, no outside assistance. Fight continues until submission or incapacitation. His mandibles clicked again. I look forward to making an example of you. As the Arcturans dispersed, taking their commander with them, the humans gathered around Kira. Their faces showed a mix of hope, fear, and confusion. She had just volunteered to fight one of the most feared warriors on the station, and she had done it without hesitation. Rita grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? He'll kill you. No one can beat an Archeran in hand-to-hand combat." Kira gave her a small smile. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Rita. But tomorrow, everyone's going to learn the truth." She looked around at the gathering of humans, seeing the spark of possibility in their eyes. "It's time to show them that we're not as helpless as they think." Night cycle had fallen over Nexus Station, but sleep eluded its inhabitants. Word of tomorrow's challenge spread through every level, from the luxurious Archeran quarters to the cramped human living sectors. In her small quarters, Kira sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by the pieces of her past she'd kept hidden for so long. The metal disc from her earlier contemplation now lay among other artifacts, a worn combat suit made of advanced polymers, a data crystal containing classified combat techniques, and a small holoprojector. She activated the projector, and a familiar face flickered to life, Captain Rashid, her old commanding officer. "If you're watching this, Lieutenant Patel, something's gone wrong," the recorded message began. "The infiltration program is being shut down. Earth's government has accepted Archeran protection status. We're being ordered to stand down, but some of us believe they'll want more than protection. Stay hidden. Stay ready. Humanity will need people like you when the time comes." Kira switched off the projection, her mind drifting to the years of training that had preceded this moment. The infiltration division hadn't just taught combat, they'd created shadows, ghosts who could vanish into any population. Every movement, every reaction had been refined until they became instinct. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Rita stood outside, carrying a medical kit. "I thought you might need this," she said, stepping inside. Her eyes widened at the equipment scattered across the floor. "So it's true. You're really military." "Was military," Kira corrected, beginning to suit up. The combat suit, dormant for so long, activated at her touch, conforming to her body. "Special Forces, Infiltration Division. We were trained to disappear, to watch and wait." Rita set down her kit. "Wait for what?" "For moments like this." Kira checked the suit's joint servos, ensuring 5 years of disuse hadn't compromised their function. The Archerans aren't just tightening security, they're preparing for something bigger. "I've seen the signs. But why fight Daxthor? Even with your training, he's..." "Because someone has to." Kira's voice was firm. "And because I'm tired of watching them break us piece by piece." The medical assistant was quiet for a moment, processing this. "The whole station will be watching tomorrow. If you lose..." "If I lose, at least they'll know someone stood up." Kira paused in her preparations. "But I don't intend to lose." Through the station's viewport, Earth's distant light beckoned. Somewhere down there, humanity continued under Archeran protection, slowly losing its identity, its spirit. Up here, on the edge of their space, the process was accelerating. As the night progressed, more visitors arrived. Mr. Watanabe brought food, his hands still shaking slightly from his recent encounter with the enforcers. Raj came with his father, offering traditional spices known for their focusing properties. Others came simply to wish her luck or share their own stories of Archeran oppression. Kira listened to them all, understanding that she had become something more than herself. She was a symbol now, whether she wanted to be or not. Their hopes, their fears, their suppressed anger, all of it crystallized around tomorrow's challenge. In the early hours, she received an unexpected visitor. An older Archeran female, her scales a pale blue, entered without knocking. "I am Celera," she announced. "Former combat instructor to the Imperial Guard." Kira tensed, ready for confrontation, but the Archeran raised her hands in a peaceful gesture. "I come to warn, not threaten. Daxthor is not just a warrior, he is a product of genetic enhancement. His strength, speed, and recovery are beyond normal Archeran capabilities." "Why tell me this?" Celera's inner eyelids flickered. Because some of us remember when Arcturans and humans first met as equals. This subjugation disgusts me. But I cannot oppose it openly. She moved closer, her voice dropping. Dax Thor has 3 weakness points. The neural cluster beneath his left shoulder plate. The joint between his primary and secondary spine. And his pride. She stepped back. Use this knowledge well. After Celera left, Kira returned to her preparation with renewed focus. She ran through combat forms, her movements controlled and precise. The suit's systems synchronized with her nervous system, enhancing her natural speed and strength without sacrificing flexibility. In the station's security center, Commander Dax Thor watched recordings of the marketplace confrontation, searching for clues about his opponent. His lieutenants had failed to find any military records matching her description. All data about Earth's special forces had been purged during the transition to protected status. She moves like a ghost, one of his officers observed. No wasted motion, no telegraphing. Are you sure about this challenge, Commander? Dax Thor's mandibles clicked in irritation. She is human. Enhanced or not, trained or not, she cannot match Arcturan's superiority. Tomorrow will remind everyone of that fact. But as he studied the footage, a flicker of doubt crossed his features. There was something in her stance, her calm in the face of his power, that suggested this human might be more dangerous than she appeared. Dawn cycle approached. Throughout the station, humans whispered prayers and hopes. Some placed secret bets, others made contingency plans in case things went wrong. The Arcturans prepared the central arena, traditionally used for their own ritual combat. In her quarters, Kira completed her final preparations. The combat suit hummed quietly, its systems ready. Her muscles were loose, her mind clear. 5 years of hiding had led to this moment, and win or lose, she would show everyone that humanity's spirit wasn't broken. She touched the metal disc one last time, her badge from the infiltration division. Their motto was etched on its surface: in shadows we serve, in silence we protect. But tomorrow wouldn't be about shadows or silence. Tomorrow would be about standing in the light, showing both humans and Arcturans that everything they thought they knew about power and control was about to change. As she stepped out of her quarters, Rita waited outside. The arena's already filling up. Every human on the station must be trying to get in. Kira nodded. Then let's not keep them waiting. She began walking toward her destiny, each step measured and purposeful. The time for hiding was over. Now it was time to show the Arcturans exactly what they had dismissed as weak and inferior for so long. The central arena of Nexus Station had never been so crowded. Designed to accommodate Arcturan ritual combat, its tiered seating stretched upward in a perfect circle, now filled with a tense mix of humans and Arcturans. The humans clustered together in groups, their whispered conversations creating a constant undercurrent of nervous energy. The Arcturans sat with military precision, many wearing their ceremonial armor that caught the light with every movement. Kira stood in the preparation chamber, performing one final check of her combat suit. The polymer material had fully bonded with her nervous system, responding to her movements with microscopic adjustments. She could feel the suit's subtle enhancements working in concert with her trained muscles. The chamber's door opened, admitting Rita. "They're ready," she said, her voice tight with concern. "The arena's at maximum capacity. Even the maintenance crews have found ways to watch through the ventilation systems." Kira nodded, her focus unwavering. "Remember what I told you, no matter what happens, keep everyone calm. This isn't just about winning or losing. It's about showing them all something new." The arena's lighting shifted, signaling the beginning of the ceremony. Kira stepped out into the open space, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. The combat area was a perfect circle, 30 meters in diameter, its surface made of a material that provided optimal grip while absorbing impact. Around the edges, holographic barriers would activate once the fight began, containing the combatants. From the opposite entrance, Commander Daxthor emerged. He had foregone his usual military uniform in favor of traditional Archeran combat gear, lightweight armor that emphasized mobility while protecting vital areas. His scales seemed to ripple with barely contained power as he moved. The station's chief administrator, a senior Archeran named Vorkath, stood at the edge of the arena. "This challenge has been issued and accepted according to our ancient laws," his voice boomed through the space. "Victory will be determined by submission or incapacitation. No energy weapons, no outside interference. The winner's authority shall be absolute." Kira and Daxthor approached the center, stopping 3 meters apart. The commander's mandibles clicked in what might have been anticipation or amusement. "Last chance to withdraw, human. Submit now, and your punishment will be minimal." "Interesting offer," Kira replied, her voice carrying clearly through the arena. "But I have a counterproposal. When I win, the harassment of civilians stops." "All of it." Laughter erupted from the Archeran sections of the crowd. Even Daxthor's composure broke for a moment in genuine mirth. "Agreed," he said, dropping into a combat stance. "Your species' delusions of adequacy are almost admirable." The barrier fields hummed to life, sealing the combat zone. Vorkath raised his hand, then dropped it sharply. "Begin." Daxthor launched forward with explosive force, covering the distance between them in a blur of motion. His first strike would have ended the fight immediately, if it had connected. But Kira wasn't there anymore, having moved with equal speed but far greater economy of motion. The commander's momentum carried him past her, his expression showing the first flicker of surprise. He recovered instantly, spinning with remarkable agility for his size, but Kira was already moving again. Her style was unlike anything the audience had seen before, no wasted movement, no dramatic gestures, just precise actions that kept her just beyond his reach. "Stand and fight." Daxthor growled, his attacks becoming more aggressive. Each strike carried enough force to shatter bone, but none found their target. Kira seemed to flow around his attacks like water, her movements so subtle that some observers couldn't track how she avoided him. The crowd's mood began to shift. The Archeran spectators' initial amusement faded into concern, while the humans leaned forward in their seats, hardly daring to breathe. They were watching something unprecedented, a human not just surviving against an Archeran warrior, but making him look clumsy. Daxthor's frustration mounted with each failed attack. His enhanced strength meant nothing if he couldn't land a hit. "Coward," he spat. "Is this how humans fight? Running and hiding?" "No," Kira replied calmly, still moving with controlled precision. "This is how we win." She changed tactics so smoothly that few noticed at first. Instead of purely evading, she began to move in closer after each dodge, her own strikes testing Daxthor's defenses. None of her attacks seemed powerful enough to damage him, but they were precisely targeted, the joint between his primary and secondary spine, the neural cluster beneath his shoulder plate. The commander's movements became less fluid as the fight continued. His superior strength was working against him now, each powerful but unsuccessful attack draining more energy. Kira's combat suit regulated her breathing and muscle tension, maintaining peak efficiency while her opponent began to tire. "Impossible," Daxthor panted, his attacks becoming more desperate. "You're just human." "Yes," Kira agreed, closing distance again. "We're human. We adapt. We observe. We learn." Her next strike found the neural cluster Celera had identified, sending a shock through Daxthor's system. "And we're done being underestimated." The commander staggered, his left side temporarily paralyzed. His next attack was wild, uncontrolled, exactly what Kira had been waiting for. She moved inside his guard, her movements a blur of practiced precision. 3 strikes landed in rapid succession, spine joint, neural cluster, and a final blow to his center of mass that sent him crashing to the arena floor. The silence was absolute. Commander Daxthor, the feared leader of station security, lay immobile, his breathing labored. Kira stood over him, her stance still ready but her voice gentle. "Submit," she said. "End this now." For a moment, it seemed he might refuse. His mandibles clicked in fury, his muscles tensing for one final effort. But his enhanced body had betrayed him, pushed beyond its limits by a fight he hadn't expected to last more than seconds. "I submit," he ground out, the words barely audible. The barrier fields dissolved. Medical teams rushed forward, both human and Archeran, but Kira remained where she was, her presence commanding attention from every corner of the arena. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly to all observers. "Remember this moment," she said. "Not because a human defeated an Archeran, but because it proves what we can accomplish together. Strength isn't about dominance. It's about protection, justice, and respect." She turned to face the Archeran officials. The terms of victory were clear. The harassment stops. All of it. And perhaps we can begin building something better than fear. The impact of her words rippled through the crowd. Humans embraced each other, tears flowing freely. Many Archerans sat in stunned silence, their worldview shaken to its foundations. A few, like Celera, nodded in approval. As medical teams helped Daxthor from the arena, Kira finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had just occurred. She had revealed herself, challenged authority, and emerged victorious. But the real challenge, transforming this moment into lasting change, was just beginning. In the days following the challenge, Nexus Station underwent changes that no one could have predicted. The immediate aftermath of Kira's victory had sent shockwaves through both human and Archeran communities, but it was the subtle shifts in daily life that truly marked the beginning of transformation. The Archeran youth patrols vanished from human sectors. Security checks became professional rather than punitive. In the marketplace, Mr. Watanabe's spice stall reopened with a new license, processed in record time. Raj worked alongside him, standing taller now, no longer trying to make himself invisible to passing Archerans. Kira found herself in an unexpected position. Her cover as a simple maintenance worker was gone, but she hadn't become the revolutionary leader many humans hoped for. Instead, she did something more challenging: she built bridges. "The combat training facility is ready," Celera announced, walking with Kira through a repurposed storage bay. The older Archeran had become an unlikely ally, her experience and influence helping to implement changes throughout the station. "Though I suspect many will find your teaching methods unconventional." The facility represented something unprecedented, a joint training program where humans and Archerans could learn from each other. Combat techniques were only part of it, the program emphasized understanding, adaptation, and mutual respect. "Commander Daxthor's recovery is proceeding well," Celera continued, her tone carefully neutral. "He has requested to speak with you." Kira nodded, having expected this moment. In the medical bay, she found Daxthor sitting up, his scales dulled from healing but his eyes sharp as ever. The commander had spent 2 weeks recovering from their fight, his enhanced body requiring time to repair the precision damage she'd inflicted. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "We have much to discuss." Their conversation was long, spanning hours as they moved from formal negotiations to genuine dialogue. Daxthor had been changed by his defeat, not broken but transformed. His understanding of strength had shifted, and with it, his approach to leadership. "I underestimated humans," he admitted. "Not just in combat, but in everything. We saw your adaptability as weakness, your diversity as chaos. We were wrong." Together, they drafted new protocols for station security, emphasizing cooperation over control. It wasn't easy, generations of prejudice couldn't be erased by a single fight, but it was a start. The changes rippled outward. Rita's medical team began collaborating with Archeran physicians, combining their knowledge to improve care for all station residents. Human engineers worked alongside Archeran technicians, their different perspectives leading to innovations in station maintenance and efficiency. But not everyone embraced the new order. A group of hardline Archerans, led by a former security officer, attempted to sabotage the progress. They planted devices throughout the human sector, intended to create chaos and justify a return to strict control. The plot might have succeeded, except that the old barriers of distrust had already begun to crumble. An Archeran maintenance worker, seeing suspicious activity, reported it to both Kira and station security. The collaborative response between human and Archeran forces prevented disaster and demonstrated the strength of their growing unity. 1 month after the challenge, Kira stood in her quarters, looking at the metal disc that had reminded her of her past for so long. Captain Rashid's warning about the future had been right, but not in the way anyone had expected. The time for hiding was over, but so was the time for conflict. A chime at her door announced Rita's arrival. "The council meeting is about to start," she said. "They're waiting for you." The newly formed Joint Council was perhaps the most significant change, a governing body comprising both humans and Archerans, working together to address station issues. Kira had initially refused a seat, but both communities had insisted. They needed someone who could bridge the gap, who understood both strength and restraint. In the council chamber, she took her place between Celera and Rita. The agenda included proposals for expanded joint training programs, revisions to commerce regulations, and plans for cultural exchange initiatives. What had begun as a fight for dignity had evolved into something far more profound, a model for genuine cooperation. "There's a message from Earth," Rita whispered as the meeting began. "Other stations have heard about what happened here. They want to know how we did it." Kira smiled slightly. The story of Nexus Station was spreading, carrying with it the possibility of wider change. Other humans who had hidden their abilities began to step forward, not as threats but as partners in building a better future. Archerans who had questioned their society's direction found new purpose in fostering cooperation. The station's viewport still showed Earth in the distance, but the view had changed. Where once it represented lost independence, it now symbolized possibility, the potential for two species to move beyond dominance and submission toward genuine partnership. As she listened to human and Archeran voices discussing their shared future, Kira reflected on the true nature of strength. It wasn't found in physical power or military might, but in the courage to change, to trust, and to work together. The challenge she'd won had opened a door, but it was everyone on the station, human and Archeran alike, who had chosen to walk through it. The old maintenance tunnels where she had hidden for so long were still there, but they served a different purpose now. New workers, both human and Archeran, learned the efficient movements and precise techniques she had used to stay unnoticed. They learned not to hide, but to understand the value of careful observation and measured response. In the marketplace, where everything had changed, daily life took on a new rhythm. Humans and Archerans mixed freely, sharing stories and trading goods. The fear that had once permeated every interaction was replaced by something else, not perfect harmony, but a growing understanding that their differences could be a source of strength rather than division. As night cycled fell over Nexus Station, Kira made her rounds one last time, not as a hidden observer, but as a guardian of the peace they had all built together. The station hummed with the energy of possibility, a testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating an enemy, but from transforming them into allies.